For over 1,000 years, stone walls determined who held power across Europe. Imposing fortresses rose from hilltops, their towers seemingly reaching toward the heavens, and their walls so massive they appeared to defy any attempt at conquest. Yet during the 15th century, a dark explosive substance arrived from the east to shatter everything humanity had built. Gunpowder didn't merely demolish walls, it annihilated an entire world and birthed something entirely new in its place. Picture 13th century Europe for a moment. The landscape bristles with massive stone constructions that represent far more than mere military installations. Every fortress stands as a declaration of dominance, a center of feudal authority, a stronghold virtually impossible to breach. Their walls, frequently between 10 and 15 feet thick, tower upward to heights exceeding 60 feet. Circular towers scan the horizons, while deep moats and drawbridges control the sole points of entry. These structures aren't simply defensive, they're complete systems of territorial control. Medieval warfare demands extreme patience. When an army seeks to capture a fortress, it must prepare for months, sometimes years, of siege. The tactics available are limited and savage. Surround the stronghold, sever food and water supplies, construct siege towers, deploy catapults and trebuchets that hurl massive stones against the walls. Yet even these machines of war, the most sophisticated of their era, barely managed to damage well-constructed defenses. A fortress with adequate provisions can endure indefinitely. Feudal nobility bases its entire power structure on precisely this equation. Whoever commands the fortresses commands the territory. Local lords operate as practically independent rulers, protected behind their stone ramparts, defying even kings when it suits their interests. Meanwhile, as Europe constructs its fortresses ever taller and thicker halfway across the world in 9th century China, Taoist alchemists pursue the elixir of immortality. Mixing saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur in specific proportions, they stumble upon something completely unexpected. A compound that burns with uncontrollable fury and produces violent explosions. The Chinese, initially startled and then captivated, begin experimenting. Soon they create the first fireworks, bamboo tubes packed with this explosive mixture that illuminate the sky during imperial celebrations. Military applications aren't far behind. Fire arrows, primitive bombs launched by catapults, and eventually, the earliest rudimentary cannons crafted from bronze. Gunpowder travels westward along the Silk Road trade routes. Merchants, diplomats, and Mongol conquerors carry the knowledge across Central Asia. The Islamic world embraces the technology during the 13th century, refining the formulations and developing their own weaponry. The Mamluks of Egypt and Ottoman armies experiment with these novel possibilities. Finally, during the mid-13th and early 14th centuries, gunpowder reaches Europe. The earliest documented records mention experiments conducted by monks and alchemists, particularly the English friar Roger Bacon, who describes the substance in coded texts, aware of its destructive potential. Europe, however, doesn't immediately embrace this revolutionary technology. Early gunpowder weapons prove unreliable, hazardous to their operators, and seemingly less effective than traditional siege machinery. The first cannons, known as bombards, are crude iron tubes reinforced with metal hoops that frequently explode, killing their own gunners. Loading them becomes a slow, complicated process. Powder must be introduced through the muzzle, carefully tamped down, a wad of wood or rope added, then the stone or iron ball, and finally the fuse ignited while praying everything functions correctly. Range remains limited, accuracy practically non-existent, and rate of fire extremely low. Perhaps 2 or 3 shots per hour if fortunate. Yet these primitive weapons possess one capability that no other medieval machine achieves. They can, eventually, breach stone walls. Not with the first shot, nor the 10th, but over time, the repeated impact of heavy projectiles against the same point can fracture even the most solid ramparts. And this simple possibility transforms the entire strategic calculus of warfare. By the mid-14th century, bombards appear on European battlefields with increasing frequency. At the Battle of Crécy in 1346, the English employ several primitive cannons against the French, though their impact proves more psychological than material. The deafening noise and flames terrify horses and demoralize troops. But the genuine revolution still lies ahead. Throughout the 15th century, European metallurgy improves dramatically. Foundries learned to create single-piece bronze cannons, far safer and more powerful than forged iron bombards. Gunpowder manufacturing techniques become refined, producing more stable and potent mixtures. Engineers begin calculating trajectories, firing angles, and optimal powder quantities for different ranges. Artillery ceases being a dangerous curiosity and becomes a decisive weapon. And it's in the year 1453 when the world witnesses the most dramatic demonstration of this new power. Constantinople, the city that for over a millennium has been the jewel of the Eastern Christian world, finds itself under siege. The Theodosian walls, constructed during the 5th century, are considered the most formidable fortifications ever created. A triple defensive system protects the city: an outer moat 60 feet wide, a low rampart, an intermediate space, and finally the inner wall rising 60 feet high with towers reaching 100 feet. Generations of conquerors have failed before these defenses. Arabs, Bulgars, Rus, all have been repelled. The city has withstood more than 20 major sieges. Its inhabitants trust that their walls will protect them once more. But Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II, a 21-year-old with extraordinary ambitions, brings something no previous besieger has possessed: artillery on a massive scale. Among his cannons stands one truly monstrous creation, cast by a Hungarian engineer named Urban. This artillery piece represents a marvel of contemporary engineering, measuring over 27 feet in length, weighing nearly 20 tons, and firing stone balls exceeding 1,300 pounds. 200 men and 60 oxen are required to transport it. Loading demands 2 hours of meticulous work, but when it fires, the impact devastates everything in its path.
Fire! Load the next charge!
Ready the second gun!
Fire! Third gun! Ignite! Keep them hot! Ram it home!
Fire!
The siege commences in April of 1453. The Byzantine defenders, led by Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos, possess merely 7,000 men to defend 14 miles of walls. The Ottomans, conversely, field between 80,000 and 150,000 soldiers. Yet more than numbers, what makes the difference is artillery. For days and weeks, Ottoman cannons bombard the walls relentlessly. The thunder continues constantly, day and night. Stone projectiles strike the walls at the same strategic points, creating fissures that gradually become cracks and then breaches. Defenders work desperately each night repairing damage, using timber, earth, and any available material to fill gaps. But it's a losing battle against time and physics. Walls that resisted for centuries begin crumbling. By May 29th, after nearly 2 months of continuous bombardment, the defenses stand gravely compromised. In the pre-dawn hours of May 29th, Mehmed orders the final assault. Thousands of Ottoman soldiers surge against breaches opened by artillery. The fighting proves fierce and desperate. Emperor Constantine dies fighting on the walls, choosing to die as a soldier rather than live as a refugee. By noon, Constantinople has fallen. The news shocks Europe. The city that seemed impregnable, protected by the world's mightiest walls, has been conquered. And everyone understands what made this victory possible: the cannons. Gunpowder has demonstrated that no wall, however imposing, can resist sustained artillery bombardment indefinitely. If this type of historical analysis fascinates you, I invite you to subscribe so you won't miss future episodes about the moments that altered humanity's course. Constantinople's fall sends shockwaves across the European continent. Military architects immediately comprehend that all medieval defensive architecture has become obsolete overnight. Vertical castles with their tall towers and thick walls now present perfect targets for artillery. The taller the walls, the easier they are to hit. Circular towers designed to resist battering rams and scaling ladders offer curved surfaces that concentrate cannonball impacts. The entire defensive system that functioned for centuries requires complete reinvention. Europe's response to this challenge proves brilliant and revolutionary. If height represents weakness, then build low. If thick walls fracture under impact, then design structures that absorb shock rather than rigidly resist it. Thus emerges what military historians call the Trace Italian or Star Fortress. These new strongholds differ radically from medieval castles. Rather than reaching skyward, they spread horizontally and partially embed themselves in terrain. Walls stand lower but far thicker, often 30 to 50 feet across, constructed on sloped ramparts that deflect cannonballs rather than receiving them head-on. The most distinctive feature is the star-shaped plan, with pentagonal bastions projecting at calculated angles. This geometry isn't decorative, it's pure military mathematics. Bastions enable defenders to establish crossfire, eliminating dead angles where attackers might shelter. Every point along the wall can be defended from at least 2 different positions. Additionally, these fortresses are designed to house their own defensive artillery. Special platforms permit cannon placement that can fire upon besieging forces, transforming the fortress from passive structure to active defense system. Constructing these new fortifications proves enormously more expensive and complex than building a medieval castle. It requires armies of laborers, specialized engineers, massive quantities of earth and stone, and years of work. A local feudal lord simply cannot afford this type of construction. Only the wealthiest kings and states across Europe possess resources to build and maintain these modern fortresses. And herein lies one of Gunpowder Revolution's most profound political consequences: the centralization of military power in monarchies' hands. Throughout the Middle Ages, power remained fragmented. Each baron with his castle operated effectively as independent, capable of challenging royal authority from behind his walls. But now, with artillery, a king with sufficient resources can destroy any rebellious castle within weeks. Feudal lords who for generations were practically sovereign within their territories lose their military autonomy. They cannot compete with royal arsenals, cannot construct the new fortifications, cannot maintain armies equipped with firearms. The balance of power shifts dramatically towards centralized monarchies. This military transformation carries social and political consequences that reshape Europe. Feudal armies based on vassalage obligations and individual knights' bravery are replaced by permanent professional forces. Warfare ceases being a matter of honor and personal valor to become applied science. Now specialists are needed: gunners who understand ballistic trajectories, engineers who calculate firing angles, logisticians who organize massive equipment transport, metallurgical technicians who manufacture increasingly superior weapons. The medieval knight figure, which dominated battlefields for centuries, enters terminal decline. What does swordsmanship or lance skill matter when a musket ball can fell the bravest warrior from 300 feet away? Military training from childhood, codes of honor, tournaments and jousts, that entire world of chivalry grows increasingly anachronistic. Warfare's new protagonists are infantry soldiers trained to fire in coordinated formations, following precise orders, functioning as components of a military machine. Warfare's cost multiplies exponentially. Manufacturing cannons requires specialized foundries, expert metallurgists, and vast quantities of bronze or iron. Gunpowder must be continuously produced in industrial amounts. Standing armies need regular salaries, uniforms, standardized equipment. Only the most organized and prosperous states can sustain this type of military apparatus. France, Spain, England, the Habsburg territories, all construct increasingly complex bureaucracies to collect taxes necessary to finance their armies. This need for massive economic resources propels European expansion worldwide. Kingdoms mastering firearms technology seek new wealth sources to finance their military ambitions. American exploration, territorial conquests in Asia and Africa, colonial empire establishment, all connect intimately with Gunpowder's military revolution. Spanish conquistadors, with their arquebuses and cannons, can subjugate entire empires possessing enormous numerical advantages. European military technology, perfected in the continent's incessant wars, becomes an instrument of global domination. 17th and 18th century monarchical absolutism has deep roots in this military transformation. Louis XIV of France can proclaim, "I am the state," precisely because he controls the monopoly on armed force. No noble can challenge him militarily. Royal armies crush any rebellion with brutal efficiency. Wars between states replace disputes between feudal lords. Europe enters an era of increasingly destructive conflicts where armies numbering tens of thousands clash in battles deciding entire nations' fates. But gunpowder's revolution doesn't merely transform warfare and politics. It also drives scientific and technological development. The need to manufacture superior cannons stimulates advances in metallurgy, chemistry, and mathematics. Engineers designing fortifications develop new calculation techniques and applied geometry. Ballistics becomes a field of scientific study. Galileo Galilei, beyond his astronomical discoveries, studies projectile trajectories and establishes fundamental principles of motion physics. European wars, paradoxically, propel modern scientific thought's development. The economy also transforms profoundly. Cannon foundries are their era's largest and most complex industrial facilities, predecessors to modern factories. Gunpowder production requires commercial networks spanning continents to obtain quality saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal. Royal arsenals employ thousands of specialized workers. A genuine armaments industry develops that generates wealth and power for regions controlling it. Cities like Liège in Belgium, Birmingham in England, or Essen in Germany become weapons manufacturing centers, creating industrialist dynasties that accumulate fortunes and political influence. Firearms diffusion also carries profound cultural and psychological consequences. The medieval world was organized around rigid hierarchies supposedly established by God. Nobles were born to govern and fight, peasants to labor and obey. But when a peasant with a musket can kill an armored noble, this entire ideological structure begins wavering. Gunpowder is in a certain sense democratic. It equalizes men before death. This transformation contributes, alongside many other factors, to the gradual erosion of ancient medieval certainties and the birth of new ideas about social organization. For 3 centuries, from the 15th through the 18th, Europe lives in constant military experimentation. Each generation produces more efficient weapons, more sophisticated tactics, more elaborate fortifications. Religious wars, dynastic struggles, conflicts over territory and commerce, all these confrontations serve as laboratories where military innovations are tested. The result is that Europe develops a military technological advantage over the rest of the world that proves determinant during the colonial era. Ancient and powerful empires like the Mughal in India, the Safavid in Persia, or the Ming in China all adopted firearms. But none developed the same European obsession with constant military innovation. Europe, fragmented into dozens of states in perpetual competition, finds itself forced to innovate to survive. This Darwinian competition produces the world's most efficient military system. When European powers expand globally, they carry this technical advantage that proves practically insurmountable for societies that haven't experienced the same technological evolution. The transformation, beginning with those crude 14th century cannons, culminates in the 19th century with precision artillery capable of destroying targets miles away, with repeating rifles firing multiple times per minute, with chemical explosives surpassing the original black powder's potency 1,000-fold. World War I, with its millions dead and unprecedented destruction, represents the logical endpoint of a process that began 600 years earlier, with Chinese alchemists seeking immortality. Reflecting on this history, an inevitable question emerges. Was gunpowder a curse or a blessing for humanity? Certainly, it caused incalculable suffering. Wars became more lethal, more destructive, more total. Millions perished in conflicts the new technology made deadlier. Yet simultaneously, gunpowder destroyed oppressive feudal power structures, contributed to scientific and technological development, and participated in the medieval world's transformation toward modernity. Like all revolutionary technologies, its effects proved profoundly ambivalent. What remains indisputable is that this dark explosive substance changed the world more profoundly than almost any other invention in human history. Walls that seemed eternal fell. Castles that dominated the landscape for a millennium became romantic ruins or museums. Feudal nobility lost its material power base. Modern centralized states emerged from the medieval order's ashes. And all this happened ultimately because someone somewhere discovered that mixing saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur produced something extraordinarily powerful and terribly destructive. If you wish to continue exploring these crucial moments where technology transformed civilization's course, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share in the comments what other historical moment you'd like us to analyze. History overflows with fascinating inflection points where the world changed forever, and each deserves to be told with the rigor and depth it merits.